They taught you that being everywhere is strength, that visibility equals power, that the more spaces you occupy, the more influence you command. Look around. The people who are everywhere accomplish nothing. The ones constantly present in every conversation, every conflict, every crisis, they are not architects. They are furniture, background noise, and other people's narratives. 500 years ago, Niccolò Machiavelli wrote a truth so brutal that the Catholic Church banned his work for 2 centuries. He understood that power is not about where you are, it is about where you refuse to go. The prince who enters every territory loses every war, not because he lacks strength, but because he wastes it in places that devour strength by design. Today, we are going to map 7 territories you must never enter, not because you cannot survive them, but because survival in the wrong place is the same as death in the right one. These are psychological spaces, social arenas, emotional battlegrounds that operate by laws most people never see. Laws that Machiavelli decoded in the courts of Florence while his contemporaries were being destroyed by forces they could not name. Once you see these territories, you cannot unsee them. You will recognize them everywhere, in your relationships, in your career, in the mirror, and you will face a choice that most people never consciously make. Continue entering these spaces out of habit, obligation, or the desperate need to be seen, or become the architect of your own presence. There is no middle ground. You are either the designer of where you appear, or you are material in someone else's design. Let's begin. The first territory is the most seductive, the most socially rewarded, the place where good people go to die without ever realizing they are bleeding. The territory of emotional chaos. You have been conditioned to believe that entering other people's emotional storms is empathy, that absorbing their panic, their rage, their despair makes you compassionate, noble, a good friend, a good partner, a good human. This is not empathy. This is strategic suicide. Machiavelli observed that the prince must never become a hostage to the emotional states of others, not because emotion is weakness, but because uncontrolled emotion in others creates a vortex that consumes everything near it. When you enter someone else's emotional chaos, you do not calm the storm. You become part of the wreckage. Think about the last time someone came to you in emotional freefall, panic, rage, heartbreak. They did not want solutions. They wanted a witness to their suffering. And what did you do? You entered, you absorbed, you tried to fix, to soothe, to rationalize. And when you left that conversation, you carried their chaos in your nervous system. This is the law. Emotional chaos spreads through proximity. Your presence in that space did not stabilize them, it destabilized you, because emotional chaos operates by contagion, not logic. It does not respond to reason, it responds to containment. And the moment you step into it without boundaries, you are no longer the helper. You are fuel, and fuel always burns. Machiavelli wrote, "The prince must learn to be not good when necessity commands." Translation: compassion without strategy is self-destruction disguised as virtue. The necessity here is your own sovereignty, your own nervous system, your own clarity. But society rewards the opposite. It praises those who sacrifice their peace for others' chaos. They call them selfless, caring, strong. This is how the herd domesticates its outliers, by attaching moral value to behaviors that guarantee you never rise above the average. If you continue entering the emotional chaos of others, you will become a professional absorber. You will be valued for your capacity to hold other people's pain, but you will never be valued for your capacity to build, to create, to lead, because people do not follow those who are drowning alongside them. They follow those who remain on solid ground and extend a hand only when the drowning person is ready to climb. Here's what you must do instead. When someone approaches you in emotional chaos, you create space, not absorption. You listen without entering. You acknowledge without adopting. You offer perspective, not participation. And if they cannot receive that, you exit. Not cruelly, not with explanation. You simply withdraw your presence from a space that is designed to consume it. This is not cruelty. This is architecture. You are not abandoning people. You are refusing to be destroyed by proximity to destruction. There is a difference. The weak cannot see it. The sovereign live by it. But emotional chaos is obvious. The second territory is far more subtle. The second place is the arena of ideological war. You see it every day. Social media, dinner tables, corporate meetings, spaces where people do not debate ideas, they perform moral combat, and you feel the pull, the need to correct, to educate, to defend truth against ignorance. Stop. Machiavelli understood something that modern people have forgotten. Convictions are not changed by logic, they are changed by necessity and fear. When you enter an ideological war, you are not fighting for truth. You are fighting for an audience that will never be convinced, only entertained. Let me show you the mechanism. Someone posts something you find absurd, factually wrong, morally repugnant. Every fiber in you wants to dismantle it, so you engage. You present evidence, you deploy reason. You are precise, articulate, devastating in your logic. And what happens? Nothing, or worse than nothing. The person doubles down, the audience polarizes. Your name is now attached to a public conflict that benefits no one except the algorithm that profits from engagement. This is the law. Ideological wars are designed for spectacle, not resolution. You entered an arena where victory is impossible because the rules are not about truth. They are about tribal signaling. The person you are debating is not trying to understand your position. They are performing loyalty to their identity, and you, by engaging, are performing the role of enemy. The crowd doesn't care who is right. They care who is more entertaining in their wrongness. Machiavelli wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." Translation: direct ideological combat is the tool of amateurs. The prince influences belief systems through changing conditions, not conversations. You do not argue someone out of their religion. You make their religion irrelevant. But you were taught that silence is complicity, that failing to speak up makes you part of the problem. This is linguistic programming designed to keep you exhausted and ineffective. The most powerful people in the world are not the ones shouting in arenas. They are the ones designing the arenas while everyone else bleeds for applause. If you continue entering ideological wars, you will become a professional arguer. People will recognize your name, not your accomplishments. You will be defined by what you oppose, not what you build. And at the end of your life, you will have a catalog of debates won and nothing else. Here is the alternative. You develop strategic silence. You choose your battles based not on righteousness, but on leverage. If an ideological conflict has no material consequence for your mission, you do not enter. If it has consequence, you do not argue publicly, you maneuver privately. You change the conditions that make the ideology powerful, not the minds that believe it. The weak need to be right in public, the sovereign need to be effective in private. And yet, there is a territory even more insidious than ideological war, a place you enter voluntarily, even eagerly, without realizing it is killing you. The third territory is the marketplace of validation. You know this place. It is everywhere. Every scroll, every post, every subtle performance designed to extract acknowledgement from others. You do not call it validation seeking. You call it sharing, connecting, being authentic. Let me translate. You are selling yourself in a market where the currency is attention and the price is your dignity. Machiavelli observed that the prince must be loved or feared, but never dependent on either. The moment your sense of worth is tied to external approval, you are no longer sovereign. You are a commodity, and commodities are traded, not respected. Think about how this operates. You post an achievement, you wait for the reactions. When they arrive, you feel temporarily satisfied. When they do not, you feel invisible. So you post again, you optimize, you perform, you curate a version of yourself designed to maximize validation. And with each iteration, you move further from who you are and closer to what the marketplace rewards. This is the law. The marketplace of validation operates by supply and demand. The more you offer, the less you are worth. When you are constantly available for validation, constantly performing for approval, you are not increasing your value. You are announcing your dependence, and dependence in any marketplace lowers your price. The rarest commodity is not the one everyone can access. It is the one you must earn proximity to. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Translation: respect is not a product of generosity, it is a product of scarcity. The leader who is everywhere, who needs everyone's approval, who performs for the crowd, is loved in the moment and forgotten immediately. The leader who is selective in presence, indifferent to applause, impossible to fully know, is feared, remembered, and ultimately more influential. But you were raised to believe that connection requires constant availability, that withholding presence is cold, arrogant, antisocial. This is domestication language. It is designed to keep you accessible, consumable, and ultimately powerless. If you continue operating in the marketplace of validation, you will become an optimization machine. You will measure your worth by metrics designed by strangers. Your identity will be a product of what performs well, not what is true. And you will wake up one day unrecognizable to yourself, surrounded by people who know your brand, but not your name. Here is the alternative. You exit the marketplace entirely. You stop performing. You stop seeking confirmation that you exist. You create from necessity, not applause. You share when it serves your mission, not your ego. And you become comfortable with the fact that most people will not understand you, validate you, or even notice you. Because the sovereign do not need an audience. They need a mission. And mission does not care about likes. This is where most people fail, not because they lack talent, but because they need to be seen more than they need to succeed. But there is a territory that destroys even those who escape validation, a place that seems noble, even heroic. So the fourth territory, the graveyard of lost causes. You have been taught that persistence is a virtue, that fighting for what you believe in regardless of outcome is the mark of character, that quitting is failure. This is how mediocrities die exhausted. Machiavelli did not waste resources on battles that could not be won, not because he lacked courage, but because he understood that strategic retreat is not cowardice, it is intelligence. The prince who fights every battle loses the war, not because he is weak, but because he is undisciplined. Let me show you the seduction. You commit to something, a relationship, a business, a project, a cause. It is not working. The evidence is clear, but you have invested time, energy, identity, so you stay, you fight. You tell yourself that persistence will transform failure into success. This is not persistence. This is sunk cost fallacy dressed as virtue. The law. Lost causes consume infinite resources and return nothing. When you remain in a situation that cannot be salvaged, you are not being strong, you are being stubborn, and stubbornness is expensive. Every hour you spend trying to resurrect the dead is an hour you do not spend building the living. Every ounce of energy poured into a relationship that ended 2 years ago is energy stolen from the one that could begin tomorrow. Machiavelli wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." Translation: loyalty to failed commitments is not honor, it is self-sabotage. The conditions that made the commitment wise have changed. The necessity now is different, and the sovereign adapts to necessity, not nostalgia. But you were taught that quitting is shameful, that abandoning a cause, a person, a mission makes you disloyal, weak, unreliable. This is how the herd keeps you trapped, by attaching moral weight to behaviors that guarantee you stay mediocre. If you continue entering the graveyard of lost causes, you will become a professional mourner. Your life will be a catalog of almosts, projects that almost worked, relationships that almost healed, businesses that almost succeeded, and on your deathbed, you will realize that almost is just another word for never. Here is what you must do instead. You develop the capacity to recognize death, to see when something is over, not when it feels over, but when the architecture proves it is over, and then you exit. Without ceremony, without extended explanations, without the need to make others understand. You calculate, is the potential return worth the continued investment? If no, you withdraw, not emotionally, strategically. You reallocate your resources to battles you can win, and you accept that walking away from the wrong war is the only way to arrive at the right one. This requires something most people never develop: the ability to kill your own projects before they kill you. The weak cling to corpses, the sovereign bury them and move. But we are not finished. There are 3 final territories, and these are the ones you enter without even realizing you have crossed the border. Let's move on to the 5th place, the confessional of performative vulnerability. You see it everywhere now: the public sharing of trauma, the broadcast of breakdown, the performance of healing. And you feel the pressure to be authentic, to be real, to show your struggles so others know they are not alone. Stop. Vulnerability is not a public performance, it is a private currency. And when you spend it publicly, you are not connecting, you are devaluing. Machiavelli understood that the prince must control what is seen, not because authenticity is weakness, but because uncontrolled revelation creates leverage for enemies. When you confess your wounds publicly, you are not brave. You are giving your competitors a map of where to strike. This is the law. Vulnerability shared with everyone is respected by no one. The moment you broadcast your internal state to an audience, you transform from human to content. Your pain becomes consumable, your healing becomes a storyline, and the people watching are not your community, they are spectators. And spectators do not help, they watch. If you continue entering the confessional of performative vulnerability, you will become a professional victim, not because you are weak, but because you have built an identity around being wounded. And identities are hard to abandon, even when they destroy you. The alternative: you share vulnerability strategically with specific people who have earned access, in private spaces where it builds trust, not brand. You stop performing your healing for strangers and start actually healing in silence. The 6th territory is quieter, but deadlier: the comparison chamber. Every scroll is a comparison, every feed is a measuring stick, and you enter willingly believing you are just staying informed, staying connected, but you are not browsing, you are hemorrhaging, because every image you see of someone else's success, body, relationship, life, is a piece of evidence that you are behind. And the brain does not distinguish between reality and perception, it only registers, you are losing. Machiavelli knew that the prince must never measure himself against others, only against his own capacity. The moment you define success by external metrics, you have already lost, because external metrics are designed by people who benefit from your dissatisfaction. This is the law. Comparison is infinite regression. There is always someone richer, stronger, more accomplished. If your worth is relative, it is always insufficient. If you continue entering the comparison chamber, you will spend your life chasing metrics that move faster than you can run. You will achieve and feel nothing. You will win and feel behind, because you are not competing against reality. You are competing against curation. The alternative: you stop measuring. You define your own benchmarks based on your mission, not the marketplace. And you become comfortable with the fact that most people will surpass you in areas you do not care about. The final territory is the most dangerous because it does not feel like a trap. The nostalgia trap. You return to the past, not physically, but mentally. You replay conversations, revisit relationships, reanalyze decisions, and you believe you are reflecting, learning, processing. You are not. You are bleeding time into a dimension that no longer exists. Machiavelli wrote, Whoever wishes to foresee the future must consult the past. But he did not mean live there. He meant learn and leave. The past is a library, not a residence. This is the law. Nostalgia is a slow death disguised as comfort. When you spend your present analyzing your past, you are not gaining wisdom. You are avoiding building. And the brain will choose familiar pain over uncertain growth every single time. If you continue entering the nostalgia trap, you will become a historian of your own life instead of the author of your future. The alternative: you mine the past for lessons, not feelings. You extract the data and exit, and you redirect that energy toward designing what comes next. You now have the map. 7 territories where your presence does not build power, it destroys it. The territory of emotional chaos, where empathy becomes fuel for other people's fires. The arena of ideological war, where truth is irrelevant and performance is everything. The marketplace of validation, where your worth is determined by strangers who will forget you tomorrow. The graveyard of lost causes, where persistence becomes self-sabotage. The confessional of performative vulnerability, where authenticity becomes content. The comparison chamber, where your success is always insufficient. The nostalgia trap, where your present is sacrificed to a past you cannot change. These are not suggestions, these are laws, and laws do not care about your intentions, they only care about your actions. You can continue entering these spaces, most people do. They enter out of habit, obligation, or the desperate need to be seen, and they wonder why their lives feel like a series of reactions instead of a strategic campaign. Or you can become the architect of your own presence. You can recognize these territories not as moral failures, but as structural traps. You can develop the discipline to see the border and stop before crossing it. This will not make you popular. People will call you cold, detached, unavailable, arrogant. Let them. Those accusations are not criticisms. They are confirmations. Confirmations that you are operating by laws they cannot see. Machiavelli was hated in his time, banned, demonized, called evil. But his work survived 5 centuries because he wrote laws, not wishes. And laws do not require approval. They require application. Here is the test. Tomorrow, someone will invite you into one of these territories: an emotional crisis, an ideological argument, a performance for validation, a lost cause, a public confession, a comparison spiral, a nostalgic loop. You will feel the pull, the social pressure, the moral obligation, and you will choose. Most people choose entry. They choose to be good, to be seen, to be validated, and they remain exactly where they are. You can choose exit. You can choose sovereignty over performance, architecture over reaction, and you will begin the transformation from material in someone else's design to designer of your own. Information without execution is entertainment. You now know the 7 territories. The question is not whether you understand them. The question is whether you have the discipline to never enter. Most people watching this will nod, agree, and change nothing. They will enter these spaces tomorrow, next week, next year. They will be everywhere and accomplish nothing. Are you most people? The subscribe button is not a request, it is a filter. Behind it, you will find frameworks too sharp for public consumption, techniques that separate architects from material. Most will not join. That is the point. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because every second you spend deciding is a second you are still standing at the border of a territory you should have already left.